So this lesson is all about together percents, decimals, and fractions. Previously, we've dealt with percents. Previously, we've dealt with decimals. Previously, we've dealt with fractions. And I've even introduced all of them to you in a row because I accidentally taught you more than you needed to know at that time, which was great. Anyway, so who can tell me? 0.2%. What does that become? What does that become as a decimal? What does it become as a decimal? Michelle. Yes, 0.002. And we know that because we bunny hop 1, 2 places to the left. Exactly. So now I have a question. What would 0.02 be as a fraction? What would 0.02 be as a fraction? This is a little bit trickier. Miles. Is it 2 over 100? Who agrees with 2 over 100? What else do we think? Anybody else have a differing opinion? Fernando? It would be. So we get down to 2 over 1,000. Now, the reason that happened is because it's actually 0.2 over 100. It's 0.2 over 100. But can I have decimals in my fractions? No. That's kind of the point of a fraction, is that it doesn't have a decimal. So I need to get rid of that decimal. The way I do it is I move it over. Am I done?
No, you gotta move over.
Exactly. What you do to the top, I want that louder for the recording. Do to the bottom. So what we do to the top, we do to the bottom. So I move that over, and that's how I get 2 over 1,000. That's how I get 2 over 1,000. We've been introduced to this before, 170%. I want you guys to first write that as a fraction. What is this as a fraction, you guys? Who can tell me it as a fraction? Hannah. Huh?
Mixed number or
Fraction first.
that would be in simplest form. Okay, 170 over 100.
170 over 100. Excellent. And Hannah was already prepping for this. She said, what about as a mixed number? What is it as a mixed number, Matthew? No, what is it as a mixed number, Rafi?
One.
Keep. You're doing it right.
7, 10.
Yeah, it is. That's simplified. So 1 and 70 hundredths. Once again, we can keep simplifying this. We get it down to 1 and 7 tenths, right? We get it down to 1 and 7 tenths. Now, here's where the cool part comes in. When we do this around, let's see. How do we write 170% as a decimal? Remember, our decimal point's right there. How do I write it as a decimal, Hannah?
You can do 1.7 or 1.70.
Exactly. So I'd move my decimal over. I go 1, 2, bunny hops, and I get 1.7 or 1.70. Same thing. Hey, look at this. That's the same as this. 1 and 7 tenths or 1.7. Because remember, this is in the tenths place. That's in the tenths place, 47. So here is my trick for you. If we have something that is like 38%, our decimal is going to begin with a 0 point. But if we have something that is like 710%, our decimal is going to begin with whatever that number is, 7.1%. So, whatever it is, if our percent is over 100, it's going to begin with that first number. If our percent is under 100, it's going to begin with 0. Over 100 begins with that first number. Under 100 begins with a 0. This will really, really help you on your math test. Or not test. It'll help you on your homework. And yes, you'll eventually have a test. So it'll really, really help you. Write this down. If the percent is under 100, the decimal starts with a 0. If the percent is over 100, it starts with the number in the hundreds place. Actually, it always starts with the number in the hundreds place. Because if we look at this, 38%, what number is in the hundred place for 38%? What number is in our hundreds place for 38%? hundreds place? Michelle? 0, because this is our ones, tens, hundredths. So no matter what, when we're doing it, it always starts with the number in the hundreds place. But this is just a good thing for you guys to remember. This will literally speed up your homework exponentially. Like, you will be able to go so much faster. You won't be having to do half of the calculations that are needed. So we look at page 120, which is our guided practice. On page 120, if we look at this, it asks us to write it both as a decimal and as a mixed number or fraction. Mixed number or fraction. Decimal is already really easy. We just hop back twice. So the first decimal is 3.25. Really easy, right? And then to write it as a fraction, it's just our percent over 100. So it'd be 325 over 100, right? 325 over 100. The easiest way to write it as a percent, or to write as a fraction, is to use the percentage to write it as a fraction, because percent to fraction's easier. And then we just simplify it as a mixed number. Once again, it's got a 325, so we just make it 3 and 25 hundredths. And then we just simplify it even more and get 3 and 1/4. That's it, 3 and 1/4. So the entire process is not that difficult. Remember, I say use the percentage to make the fraction. The percentage with the fraction is easier. So this would be 480 over 100, or 4 and 80 hundredths, or we keep going, 4 and 8 tenths, or 4 and 4/5. We keep going like that. Let's look at one example on our homework, actually. Let's look at one example on our homework. If we looked at number 4 on our homework. If we look at number 4 on the homework, it says write each percent as a decimal and a fraction. So, first, how do I write this as a decimal? Who can tell me, Miles?
You have to use decimal over 2 times.
Perfect. We move it over 2 times to the left because we're moving it away from our percentage sign. So we move it 1, 2. So we get our decimal to be 0.0055. You could also write 0.0055, but I think that's just annoying, so I tend to just write 0.0055. Now, to make it as a fraction, remember, the easiest way to make it as a fraction is to use our percentage. So we just do it like this. We write 0.55 over, and what do we put it over? 100, because percents, no matter what, are always over 100. Can I have a decimal in my percentage, or in my fractions? Can I have decimals in my fractions? No, so I get rid of my decimal. I move it over. 1, 2. So I do the same to the bottom. 1, 2. So then I get 55 over 10,000. 55 over 10,000. And then I just simplify.